Imagine moving to a small town to heal from heartbreak, only to discover that sometimes the most beautiful things grow right next door. Rachel thought she was just buying groceries when she bumped into Emily at the local market, but that simple invitation, "Come by later, I'll show you my garden," would change everything she thought she knew about love, herself, and second chances. Before we dive into this story, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The automatic doors of Miller's Market slid open with a soft whoosh. I stepped inside, still getting used to the small-town pace of Willowbrook, Oregon. The automatic doors of Miller's Market slid open with a soft whoosh. I stepped inside, still getting used to the small-town pace of Willowbrook, Oregon. 3 weeks since the divorce papers were signed. 3 weeks since I'd packed my Honda Civic and driven 8 hours from Portland to this place where nobody knew about David's affair or my spectacular failure at marriage. The market was tiny compared to the Whole Foods I was used to. Narrow aisles, handwritten price tags, and the kind of fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly green. I grabbed a basket and headed for the produce section. My mental grocery list simple: coffee, bread, something that resembled vegetables. That's when I saw her. She was standing by the tomatoes, holding one up to the light like she was examining a precious gem. Auburn hair caught in a messy bun, paint-stained jeans, and this focused expression that made me stop mid-step. Something about the way she moved, deliberate, gentle, made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt in months. I pretended to study the lettuce while stealing glances. She had freckles across her nose and wore no makeup that I could see. When she smiled at something, maybe the perfect tomato she'd found, her whole face lit up. "First time shopping here?" I jumped. She was talking to me. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you." Her voice was warm, with just a hint of rasp. "I'm Emily. Emily Hart. You're the new neighbor, right? The blue house on Maple Street?" Rachel Morgan. I felt heat creep up my neck. And yes, that's me. Still figuring out where everything is. "Well, you picked the right place for tomatoes." She held up her selection. "Mrs. Miller grows these herself. They actually taste like tomatoes, not cardboard." I laughed. The first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. Good to know. I'm still learning the difference between real food and whatever I was eating in the city. "Portland? How did you—" "Lucky guess. We get a lot of refugees from the big city." Her eyes crinkled when she smiled. "What brought you to our little corner of nowhere?" The question I'd been dreading. I'd practiced answers. Work, change of pace, cheaper rent. All true, but not the whole truth. "Needed a fresh start," I said finally. Emily nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. Sometimes that's the only thing that saves us. There was something in her tone, a recognition maybe, that made me look at her more carefully. She had kind eyes, the color of honey in sunlight, but there was depth there. Stories. "Well, Rachel Morgan, welcome to Willowbrook." She shifted her basket to her other arm. "If you need any recommendations, best coffee, worst gossip, which roads to avoid when it rains. I'm just 2 houses down." "The one with the amazing garden, you noticed?" Her face brightened. "That's my pride and joy. Took me 3 years to get the soil right. But now," she trailed off, looking almost embarrassed. "Sorry, I get carried away talking about plants. Don't apologize. It sounds wonderful." We stood there for a moment, the conversation hanging between us like a bridge. Neither of us was quite ready to cross. The market's background noise, cartwheels squeaking, the distant hum of refrigerators, seemed to fade. "Actually," Emily said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "if you're not busy later, you should come by. I could show you around the garden, maybe give you some herbs to take home." My heart did this weird flutter thing. I wouldn't want to impose. You wouldn't be. I love showing it off, and it's nice to have someone new to talk to. She paused. "Plus, I make terrible coffee, but I have excellent tea." I found myself nodding before I'd fully decided. "That sounds really nice. Great. How about around 5? The light is perfect then." 5 works. Perfect. She started to move away, then turned back. "Oh, and Rachel, don't bring anything. Just yourself." I watched her walk toward the checkout, my basket still containing only the wilted lettuce I'd been pretending to examine. My hands were shaking slightly. When had that started? And my chest felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with anxiety. What was wrong with me? It was just a neighborly invitation. People did this in small towns, right? Showed each other their gardens, shared tea, made conversation. It didn't mean anything. But as I finally managed to finish my shopping, grabbing items at random, my mind elsewhere, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation. The way Emily had said just yourself like that was enough. Like I was enough. Back in my car, groceries in the back seat, I sat for a moment staring at the blue house 2 doors down from mine. I could see the edge of her garden from here, neat rows of green, a wooden trellis covered in something that might be beans, the corner of what looked like a greenhouse. I thought about David, how he'd never noticed when I'd tried to grow herbs on our apartment balcony, how he'd complained about the mess when I'd brought home flowers from the farmer's market, how he'd made me feel like my interests were silly, my enthusiasms embarrassing. Emily had lit up when she talked about her tomatoes. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister. How's small-town life? Met any interesting people yet? I stared at the message, then at Emily's house, then back at my phone. Maybe, I typed back. But even as I sent it, I knew that was an understatement. Something had shifted in those few minutes by the tomatoes, something I wasn't ready to name but couldn't ignore. I drove the 2 blocks home, my mind already jumping ahead to 5 o'clock, wondering what I should wear to look at a garden, wondering why it mattered, wondering what exactly I was getting myself into. As I pulled into my driveway, I caught a glimpse of Emily in her backyard, kneeling beside a raised bed, her hands deep in the soil. She looked completely at peace, completely herself. For the first time since the divorce, I felt something other than sadness or anger, or that hollow emptiness that had become my constant companion. I felt curious, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit hopeful. At exactly 5 o'clock, I stood at Emily's front gate, second-guessing everything. I'd changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out my eyes, and spent 20 minutes staring at myself in the mirror, trying to understand why this felt so important. The gate was painted white, slightly weathered, with a small sign that read, Heart's Haven, in flowing script. Beyond it, a stone path wound through what could only be described as a paradise. I'd seen the garden from a distance, but up close it was breathtaking. Raised beds lined with cedar, each one a carefully orchestrated symphony of colors and textures, tomato plants heavy with fruit, their vines supported by elegant wooden stakes, rows of herbs that filled the air with the scent of basil and rosemary, sunflowers towering along the back fence, their faces turned toward the late afternoon light. You made it! Emily emerged from behind a trellis covered in what I now recognized as sugar snap peas. She'd changed too. Clean jeans, a faded blue t-shirt that made her eyes even more golden, her hair loose around her shoulders. This is incredible, I said, and meant it. It's like something out of a magazine, hardly. But she was pleased, I could tell. Come on, let me give you the tour. She led me down the main path, pointing out different sections like a proud parent introducing her children. The herb spiral near the house, designed so each plant got exactly the right amount of sun and drainage. The 3 sisters' garden where corn, beans, and squash grew together in perfect harmony. The cutting garden where zinnias and cosmos bloomed in wild profusion. How long have you been doing this? I asked, kneeling to smell a particularly fragrant patch of lavender. Seriously? About 5 years, but I've been playing in dirt since I was a kid. She crouched beside me, her fingers gentle on the purple spikes. My grandmother had a garden like this. Spent every summer with her, learning which plants liked each other, how to read the soil, when to harvest. She taught you well. She taught me everything. Emily's voice went soft. She died my senior year of college, left me her house, this house, and all her gardening journals. Took me a while to work up the courage to actually use them. I looked around with new understanding. This wasn't just a garden, it was a legacy. A love letter written in soil and seeds. What did you do before this? Graphic design, actually, in Seattle. Emily stood, brushing dirt from her knees. Corporate stuff, mostly. Logos and branding for companies I didn't care about. Good money, terrible hours, and I never saw the sun. What changed? She was quiet for a moment, leading me toward a wooden bench positioned to catch the last rays of sunlight. Burnout, I guess. And my grandmother's voice in my head, telling me I was wasting my life in a gray cubicle when I could be growing things. We sat down, the bench warm from the day's heat. From here, I could see the entire garden spread out before us like a living painting. Bees hummed lazily among the flowers, and somewhere nearby, a bird was singing. Do you miss it? Seattle? Sometimes. The energy, the restaurants, having more than one coffee shop, she smiled. But not the stress. Not the feeling like I was always running toward something I didn't actually want. I knew that feeling intimately. I think I know what you mean. What about you? What brought you here, really? The question I'd been avoiding all day. I picked at a loose thread on my sweater, buying time. Divorce, I said finally. Messy, painful, and very public. David, my ex-husband, decided our marriage wasn't exciting enough, so he found excitement with his 23-year-old assistant. Ouch. Yeah, the worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was realizing that I'd spent 5 years trying to be the person he wanted me to be, and I'd completely lost track of who I actually was. Emily was quiet, but I could feel her listening, really listening, in a way that made me want to keep talking. I used to paint, I continued, watercolors mostly, landscapes, flowers, whatever caught my eye. David thought it was a waste of time, said I should focus on my real career. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Funny thing is, I was actually good at it, had a few pieces in local shows, even sold a couple. But he made me feel like it was just a hobby, something to be embarrassed about. Do you still paint? I brought my supplies with me, but I haven't touched them since the move. It's like I forgot how. Emily turned to face me fully. Maybe you just need the right inspiration. Something in her voice made my pulse quicken. The way she was looking at me, direct, interested, like she could see something I'd forgotten about myself. The light here is amazing, she continued, especially in the mornings, when the mist is still hanging over the mountains, and the colors. She gestured toward the garden. They change throughout the day. I bet you'd find plenty to paint. Maybe, I said, but for the first time in months, the idea didn't feel impossible. A comfortable silence settled between us. The sun was lower now, casting everything in that golden hour light that photographers dream about. Emily was right. It was perfect. Can I ask you something? I said. Shoot. Why did you invite me over? I mean, really, you don't know me at all. Emily considered this, her fingers tracing patterns on the bench between us. Honestly, you looked like you needed a friend, and... She paused, seeming to weigh her words. There was something about you in the market. The way you were trying so hard to blend in, to be invisible. I recognized it. Recognized what? Someone who's been hurt, someone who's forgotten how to take up space in the world. The accuracy of this observation hit me like a physical blow. I felt tears prick at my eyes and blinked them back quickly. Sorry, Emily said. Too much? No, it's just... You're right. I have been trying to be invisible. Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Willowbrook needs more interesting people. I'm not that interesting, says the woman who used to paint and just moved across the state to start over. That sounds pretty interesting to me. Before I could respond, Emily stood up. Come on, let me show you the greenhouse. And I promised you tea. The greenhouse was a small, glass-walled structure tucked into the corner of the yard. Inside, it was warm and humid, filled with seedlings and exotic plants that couldn't survive Oregon's winters. Emily moved between the tables with practiced ease, checking moisture levels and adjusting ventilation. This is where the magic happens, she said. Starting seeds, propagating cuttings, keeping the tender things alive when the world gets cold. I watched her hands as she worked, gentle but confident, completely at home in this green sanctuary. There was something mesmerizing about the way she moved, the care she took with each plant. You really love this, I observed. I do. It's the first thing I've ever done that feels completely mine, you know? Not what someone else expected of me, not what I thought I should be doing, just Me. I understood exactly what she meant. We spent the next hour in the greenhouse and garden, Emily sharing stories about her plants like they were old friends. She sent me home with a small pot of basil, a bundle of fresh mint, and a promise that I was welcome back any time. Walking the short distance to my house, the herbs cradled in my arms, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: contentment. Not happiness exactly, but a quiet sense of rightness, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. That night, I set up my easel for the first time since the move. 3 days later, I found myself back at Emily's gate. I hadn't planned it, or maybe I had subconsciously, when I'd chosen to take my evening walk in the direction of her house instead of toward the town center. She was in the garden, as I'd somehow known she would be, kneeling beside a bed of what looked like different varieties of mint. The late afternoon sun caught the red highlights in her hair, and she was humming something under her breath. "Rachel." She looked up with genuine pleasure. "Perfect timing. I was just thinking about you." My heart did that flutter thing again. "You were?" I was wondering how the basil was doing, and whether you'd had a chance to try painting again. I held up the small canvas I'd been carrying. "Actually, I did. It's not much, but..." Emily wiped her hands on her jeans and came over to look. I'd painted her garden from memory. The view from the bench where we'd sat, all golden light and green abundance. It was rough, unfinished, but it captured something of the feeling I'd had that evening. "Rachel." Her voice was soft with surprise. "This is beautiful." "It's just a sketch, really." "No, it's not. Look at the way you caught the light on the sunflowers, and the depth in the shadows." She looked up at me. David was an idiot. The bluntness of the statement made me laugh. "You don't even know him." "I know he convinced a talented artist to stop creating. That's enough." We stood there looking at the painting, and I felt something shift inside me. Pride, maybe, or recognition. Like Emily was holding up a mirror and showing me a version of myself I'd forgotten existed. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" she asked suddenly. "Nothing fancy, just pasta and whatever vegetables are ready to harvest. But I'd love the company." I should have said no. I barely knew this woman, and there was something about the way she made me feel that was both thrilling and terrifying. But the thought of going back to my empty house, eating another frozen meal while scrolling through my phone, felt unbearable. I'd love to. Emily's kitchen was as warm and welcoming as her garden. Herbs hung drying from the ceiling beams, and the windowsill was crowded with small pots of sprouting seeds. She moved around the space with easy familiarity, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator and setting a large pot of water to boil. "Can I help?" I asked. "You can keep me company, and maybe tell me more about your painting." I perched on a stool at the kitchen island, watching her work. She chopped vegetables with the same careful attention she gave her plants, and I found myself mesmerized by the rhythm of her knife against the cutting board. "I started when I was in college," I said. "Took an art class as an elective and fell in love. My professor said I had a good eye for color and composition." "What did you like to paint?" "Landscapes, mostly. There was something about trying to capture light and atmosphere that felt like solving a puzzle. The way morning light is different from evening light. How shadows change the whole mood of a scene." Emily smiled. "Sounds like you understand gardens better than you think." "How so?" "It's all about light and composition. Knowing which plants will look good together, how tall things will get, what colors will complement each other. And timing. Understanding how the garden will change throughout the day, throughout the seasons. I'd never thought about gardening as an art form, but listening to Emily talk about it, I could see the parallels. "Is that why you do it? For the beauty?" Emily paused in her chopping, considering the question. "Partly. But it's more than that. There's something about working with your hands, about being part of the cycle of growth and harvest, that feels essential. Like I'm connected to something bigger than myself." She slid the vegetables into a pan with olive oil, and the kitchen filled with the scent of garlic and herbs. "I think I lost that," I said quietly. "That sense of connection. Somewhere along the way, I started living my life like I was watching it happen to someone else." "When did it start?" "The feeling disconnected. I thought about it, tracing the timeline backward. Probably when I met David. He had such strong opinions about everything. What I should wear, what we should do on weekends, what counted as a real career. It was easier to go along with him than to argue. But you did argue, sometimes. At first. But he had this way of making me feel like my opinions were naive or impractical. Like I was being silly for wanting things he didn't value. I picked at the edge of my napkin. Eventually, I just stopped having opinions. Emily turned from the stove to look at me. That must have been lonely. The simple observation hit me harder than any of the sympathy I'd received from friends and family. Lonely, yes. That was exactly what it had been. It was, I admitted. Even when we were together, especially when we were together, I felt completely alone. And now? I looked around Emily's kitchen, at the evidence of a life lived with intention and care, at Emily herself with her paint-stained fingers and genuine interest in my answers. Now I'm actually alone, but I don't feel lonely. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Emily stirred the pasta into the boiling water. Sometimes you have to be by yourself to remember who you are. We ate dinner on Emily's back porch, the garden spread out before us in the gathering dusk. She'd made a simple pasta with the vegetables from her garden, but it was the best meal I'd had in months. Everything tasted like itself. The tomatoes were intensely tomatoey, the basil bright and peppery, the zucchini sweet and tender. This is incredible, I said. I'd forgotten food could taste like this. That's what happens when you grow it yourself. You know exactly where it came from, how it was treated, when it was picked. Emily twirled pasta around her fork. There's no mystery, no wondering what chemicals were used or how far it traveled. Do you grow everything yourself? Most of it. What I can't grow, I buy from other local farmers. It's more expensive than the grocery store, but... She shrugged. I'd rather eat less and know it's good. As we talked, the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Emily had strung lights through the trees, and they began to twinkle on automatically as darkness fell. The effect was magical, like dining in a fairy tale. Can I ask you something personal? Emily said as we finished eating. Sure. Do you think you'll stay? In Willowbrook, I mean. The question surprised me. I'd been so focused on getting through each day that I hadn't thought much about the future. I don't know, I said honestly. I signed a year lease, so at least that long. But after that, I shrugged. I guess it depends on whether I can figure out how to build a life here. What would that look like? A life here? I considered this, looking out at the garden where fireflies were beginning to blink among the flowers. I'd want to paint again, really paint, not just dabble. Maybe find a way to make a living at it, or at least supplement my freelance work. I paused. I'd want to have a garden, though nothing as ambitious as this. Just enough to grow my own tomatoes. And friends? Yes, definitely friends. I looked at Emily. I'd forgotten how good it feels to have a real conversation with someone. What makes a conversation real? When you can say what you actually think, instead of what you think the other person wants to hear. When you can be quiet together without it being awkward. When someone asks you a question because they genuinely want to know the answer, not because they're waiting for their turn to talk. Emily smiled. I like that definition. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. I felt more relaxed than I had in months, maybe years. There was something about Emily's presence that made me feel safe to be myself, whoever that was. I should probably head home, I said eventually, though I didn't want to. Probably, Emily agreed, but she didn't move either. Thank you for dinner. And for this. I gestured vaguely at the garden, the evening, the feeling of connection I couldn't quite name. Thank you for staying, and for showing me your painting. We walked to the gate together, and I felt the evening ending like a door closing. Same time tomorrow? Emily asked, and my heart leaped. Are you sure? I don't want to impose... Rachel. Emily's voice was gentle but firm. You're not imposing. I like having you here. The simple honesty of the statement took my breath away. Then yes, I said, same time tomorrow. The next evening found me at Emily's gate again. This time carrying a small canvas and my watercolor supplies. I'd spent the day thinking about our conversation. about the way she'd looked at my painting, about the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in years. Emily was waiting for me in the greenhouse, repotting what looked like tiny tomato seedlings. She'd changed into a soft yellow sundress that made her skin glow, and her hair was braided loosely over one shoulder. "You brought your paints," she observed with pleasure. "I thought maybe I could work while you garden, if that's okay." "More than okay. I'd love to watch you work." She showed me to a small table near the greenhouse where the light was perfect, then went back to her seedlings. For a while, we worked in comfortable silence, me mixing colors and sketching the basic composition, Emily carefully transplanting each tiny plant into its own pot. "Tell me about these," I said, nodding toward the seedlings. "Cherokee purples. They're an heirloom variety, huge dark tomatoes with the most incredible flavor, but they're tricky to grow, very particular about their soil and water." "Like people?" Emily laughed. "Exactly like people. Some plants are easy. Throw them in the ground and they'll grow anywhere. Others need exactly the right conditions, the right care, the right attention. Which kind are you?" She considered this, her hands gentle on a particularly delicate seedling, probably the difficult kind. "I need a lot of space, good drainage, and someone who understands that I don't bloom on anyone else's timeline." I looked up from my painting. "And what kind am I?" Emily studied me with those honey-colored eyes, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "I think you're like these Cherokee purples, capable of something really beautiful, but you've been planted in the wrong soil for so long that you've forgotten how to grow." The observation was so accurate it made my chest tight. I bent back over my painting, using the excuse of mixing a new color to hide my reaction. "What about David?" Emily asked quietly. "What kind of plant was he?" I thought about my ex-husband, his need for constant attention, his ability to thrive in any social situation, his tendency to take over whatever space he was in. "Kudzu," I said finally. Emily burst out laughing. "Kudzu, the invasive vine that chokes out everything else?" "Pretty much. He looked good from a distance, grew fast, and before I knew it, he'd taken over my entire life. And now I'm trying to figure out what grows in the space he left behind." Emily set down her trowel and came over to look at my painting. I'd been working on the greenhouse, trying to capture the way the late afternoon light filtered through the glass and made everything inside glow green and gold. "This is gorgeous," she said, leaning close enough that I could smell her shampoo. "Something herbal and clean. The way you've done the light, it's exactly how it feels to be in there." "Really?" "Really. You've captured something I never could have described in words." She was standing right behind me now, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body. When she reached over my shoulder to point at a particular section of the painting, her arm brushed against mine. "See how you've made the glass almost disappear here? Like the boundary between inside and outside doesn't really exist?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The casual contact had sent electricity shooting through my entire nervous system. That's exactly what it feels like when I'm working in there. Like I'm part of the garden, not separate from it. She moved to my other side, ostensibly to get a better view of the painting, but now her hip was almost touching my shoulder. I tried to focus on her words, on the painting, on anything other than the way my skin seemed to be humming with awareness. "Could you show me how you did this part?" she asked, pointing to where I'd painted the reflection of plants in the greenhouse glass. "It's just layering," I managed. "You paint what's behind the glass first, then add the reflection on top, but lighter, more transparent. Like this?" Emily picked up one of my brushes and leaned over the painting. To reach the spot she was aiming for, she had to press closer, her breast brushing against my arm as she moved. I stopped breathing entirely. "Emily," I said, my voice coming out rougher than intended. She looked up at me, the brush still in her hand, and I saw something shift in her expression. We were so close I could count the freckles across her nose, could see the way her lips parted slightly as she realized what was happening between us. "Rachel," she whispered. For a moment, we just looked at each other. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, could see the pulse jumping in Emily's throat. Then, slowly, carefully, like she was approaching a wild animal that might bolt. Emily reached out and touched my cheek. Her fingers were cool from the evening air, slightly rough from garden work, and absolutely perfect against my skin. I leaned into the touch without thinking, my eyes fluttering closed. "Is this okay?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I opened my eyes and found her watching me with an expression so tender it made my chest ache. "I don't know," I said honestly. I don't usually." "Neither do I," Emily said quickly. "I've never felt anything like this before." "Like what?" "Like I want to know everything about you. Like I want to take care of you and be taken care of by you. Like I want to kiss you so badly I can barely think about anything else." The honesty of her confession took my breath away. I'd been married for 5 years, had dated men before David, but I'd never experienced this kind of raw, electric attraction. This feeling like my skin was too small for my body, like I might fly apart if Emily stopped touching me. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of me? Of this? Of how you make me feel? Of what it might mean?" Emily's thumb traced across my cheekbone, and I shivered. "We don't have to figure out what it means right now," she said. "We don't have to figure out anything. We can just see what happens. What if I'm not ready? What if I mess this up? Then we'll figure it out together. But Rachel..." She leaned closer, her forehead almost touching mine. "I think you're braver than you know. You left everything familiar and started over. You picked up a paintbrush again after months of not creating. You're here, letting yourself feel something new. You make me want to be brave," I whispered. "You already are." The space between us seemed to shrink without either of us moving. I could feel Emily's breath on my lips, could see the gold flecks in her eyes. My whole body was trembling with want and fear and something that felt like coming home. "Emily," I breathed. "Yes, I think I want you to kiss me." She smiled then, soft and radiant, and leaned forward until her lips were just barely touching mine. "I think I want that too," she whispered against my mouth. But before either of us could close that final distance, a sharp crack of thunder split the air above us. We jumped apart as the first fat raindrops began to fall, shattering the moment like glass. "Oh no!" Emily grabbed my painting, protecting it from the sudden downpour. "Quick! Inside!" We ran for the house, laughing and stumbling as the sky opened up and soaked us both. By the time we reached Emily's back door, we were drenched and breathless. Standing in her kitchen, dripping on the tile floor, I looked at Emily, her dress clinging to her curves, her hair escaping from its braid, her eyes bright with laughter and something else, and felt my heart turn over completely. "I should go," I said, though it was the last thing I wanted to do. "You should," Emily agreed. But she didn't move away from me. We stood there in her kitchen, the rain drumming against the windows, the air between us still electric with possibility. "Tomorrow?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she confirmed. But as I ran through the rain to my own house, my painting clutched against my chest. I knew that everything had changed. Whatever was happening between Emily and me, there was no going back now. I didn't go to Emily's the next day, or the day after that. Instead, I spent 48 hours pacing my small house like a caged animal, alternating between reliving every moment of our almost kiss and convincing myself I'd imagined the whole thing. The rational part of my brain, the part that sounded suspiciously like David, kept up a steady commentary. "You're rebounding. You're confused. You don't even know if you're attracted to women. You're going to ruin the first real friendship you've had in years." But my body remembered the feeling of Emily's fingers on my cheek, the way my skin had come alive under her touch, the electricity that had arced between us in those charged moments before the storm hit. I'd never been attracted to a woman before. At least I didn't think I had. But then again, I'd spent so many years trying to be the person David wanted me to be that I wasn't sure I knew what my own desires looked like anymore. On the third day, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the painting I'd done in Emily's greenhouse, and trying to work up the courage to text her, when I heard a soft knock at my front door. My heart leapt. Emily. But when I opened the door, I found a small pot of herbs on my doorstep, with a note tucked underneath. Thought you might like some fresh oregano for cooking. No pressure to visit. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. E. I picked up the pot with shaking hands. The oregano was perfect, of course, healthy and fragrant, but it was the note that made my eyes fill with tears. No pressure. Just thinking of you. Even in my absence, Emily was taking care of me. I spent the rest of the day composing and deleting text messages. Thank you for the oregano. Delete. Sorry I've been MIA. Delete. I'm scared and confused and I don't know what I'm doing. Delete. Finally, I gave up on words and did what I did best. I painted. This time, I painted Emily. Not her face. I wasn't skilled enough for portraits, but her hands. The way they'd looked as she'd worked with her seedlings, gentle and sure and completely at home in the soil. I painted them from memory, trying to capture not just their appearance, but their essence, the care, the competence, the tenderness. When I finished, hours later, I stared at the canvas and felt something break open in my chest. This was what I was afraid of. Not Emily, not even the possibility of being attracted to women. I was afraid of wanting something this much, of caring about someone enough that losing them would matter. David had been safe in a way. I'd loved him, or thought I had, but it had been a careful, controlled kind of love, the kind where you hold back just enough of yourself that if it ends, you'll survive intact. What I felt for Emily was different, bigger, more dangerous, the kind of feeling that could change everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Saw your light on late. Hope you're painting something beautiful. I stared at the message for a long time. Then at the painting of her hands. Then back at the message. I am, I typed back. Thank you for the oregano. And for understanding. Always, came her immediate reply. Take all the time you need. But I didn't want to take time. I wanted to run to her house right now, in my paint-stained clothes and emotional confusion, and tell her everything I was feeling. I wanted to finish what we'd started in the greenhouse. I wanted to stop being afraid. Instead, I went to bed and dreamed of honey-colored eyes and gentle hands and the taste of rain on summer air. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices in Emily's backyard. Peering out my bedroom window, I saw her working in the garden with another woman, tall, blonde, wearing expensive-looking athleisure and gesturing animatedly as she talked. My stomach dropped. Of course Emily had other friends, other people in her life. I'd been hiding in my house for 3 days while she'd been living her normal life, probably wondering why the weird new neighbor had suddenly disappeared. I watched them work together, the blonde woman clearly comfortable in Emily's space, and felt a stab of something that might have been jealousy. They looked easy together, natural, like they'd done this many times before. I was being ridiculous. Emily and I had shared one almost kiss, a few conversations, a couple of dinners. That didn't give me any claim on her time or attention, but watching her laugh at something the other woman said, I felt the distance I'd created between us like a physical ache. Around noon, there was another knock at my door. This time, it was Emily herself, holding a basket of vegetables and wearing a concerned expression. Hi, she said simply. Hi. I was suddenly aware of my unwashed hair, my rumpled clothes, the fact that I probably looked like I'd been hiding in my house for 3 days. Which I had. I brought you some things from the garden. Thought you might be running low on fresh food. Thank you, that's really thoughtful. I took the basket, our fingers brushing briefly. Even that small contact sent sparks up my arm. Rachel, Emily said gently. Are you okay? You seem, I don't know, different. I wanted to tell her everything, about my confusion, my fear, my complete lack of experience with feeling this way about another woman, about how I'd spent 3 days thinking about her hands, and the way she'd looked at me in the greenhouse, about how I was terrified of wanting something I didn't understand. Instead, I said, I'm fine. Just needed some space to think. Emily nodded, but I could see the hurt flash across her face before she hid it. Of course. I understand. She stepped back from my door. Well, I'll let you get back to your thinking. The vegetables should keep for a few days. Emily, wait. But she was already walking away, her shoulders set in a way that suggested she was holding herself very carefully together, I closed the door and leaned against it, the basket of vegetables heavy in my arms. Through the window, I could see Emily back in her garden, working with sharp, efficient movements that spoke of frustration or hurt or both. The blonde woman was gone. I spent the rest of the day telling myself I'd done the right thing, that I needed time to figure out my feelings before I did something that might hurt both of us, that it was better to be cautious, to think things through, to not rush into something I might regret. But that evening, as I sat on my back porch eating a salad made from Emily's vegetables, I could see her in her garden, working alone as the sun set. She looked smaller somehow, less vibrant than usual, and I realized that in trying to protect myself from potential hurt, I might have already caused the very thing I was afraid of. I thought about the note she'd left with the oregano. No pressure to visit, just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. She'd given me space without making me feel guilty about needing it. She'd continued to care for me even when I'd pulled away, and I'd repaid that kindness by treating her like a stranger at my door. I picked up my phone and started typing. I'm sorry. I'm scared and confused and I don't know what I'm doing, but I miss you. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the send button. Then I deleted it and put the phone away. Some conversations I realized needed to happen in person. But as I watched Emily pack up her tools and head inside for the night, I wondered if I'd already waited too long. If the moment we'd shared in the greenhouse was gone forever, killed by my fear and inability to be brave when it mattered most. The thought of losing Emily before I'd even really had her made my chest ache in a way that felt like grief. Maybe that was my answer right there. You don't grieve for something that doesn't matter. The storm hit Willowbrook 3 days later with a fury that seemed to match my internal turmoil. I'd been working up the courage to go to Emily's house, to apologize and try to explain my behavior, when the first rumble of thunder shook my windows. By evening, the rain was coming down in sheets, and the wind was howling through the trees with enough force to make me worry about power lines. I was huddled in my living room with candles at the ready when a particularly violent gust rattled my entire house. That's when I heard it. A sharp crack followed by a tremendous crash that seemed to come from right next door. Emily. I grabbed a flashlight and rain jacket and ran outside, not caring that I was immediately soaked to the skin. In the strobing light of lightning, I could see what had happened. A massive oak tree had fallen across Emily's driveway, blocking her car and taking down power lines in the process. Her house was completely dark. I ran to her front door and pounded on it, shouting over the wind. Emily, are you okay? The door opened, and Emily appeared with a battery-powered lantern, her face pale with shock. Rachel, what are you doing out in this? I heard the tree fall. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine, but another crack of thunder made us both jump. Come inside before you get struck by lightning. She pulled me into her house, and I stood dripping in her entryway, suddenly aware of how I must look. Soaked, wild-haired, probably crazy-eyed with worry. I was so scared something had happened to you, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Emily stared at me for a moment, then set down her lantern and reached for a towel from a nearby closet. Here, she said, wrapping it around my shoulders. You're shivering. Her hands were gentle as she helped me out of my wet jacket, and I felt that familiar electricity spark between us despite everything that had happened over the past few days. Emily, let's get you warm first, she interrupted. Then we can talk. She led me to her living room, where she'd already lit several candles and built a fire in the fireplace. The room was warm and golden, a refuge from the storm raging outside. Sit, she said, pointing to the couch. I'll make tea. I wanted to follow her, to start the conversation I'd been rehearsing for days, but something in her tone told me to wait. So I sat by the fire and tried to figure out how to begin. Emily returned with 2 steaming mugs and settled on the opposite end of the couch, as far from me as possible while still being in the same room. Thank you, I said, accepting the tea. For letting me in, for taking care of me, for everything. Of course. Her voice was carefully neutral. You were worried about the tree. That was kind of you. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling fire and the storm outside. I could feel Emily waiting, giving me space to say whatever I'd come to say. "I owe you an apology," I began. "The way I've been acting, the way I pulled away after what happened in the greenhouse. It wasn't fair to you. You don't owe me anything, Rachel. You needed space. I understand. But that's just it. I don't think you do understand, and I don't think I've been honest with you. Or with myself." Emily looked up from her tea, and in the candlelight, her eyes were unreadable. "I've never felt this way about a woman before," I continued, my voice barely audible over the storm. "I've never felt this way about anyone, actually. What happened between us in the greenhouse, it scared me. Not because I didn't want it, but because I wanted it so much." Emily was very still, listening. "I spent 5 years with David trying to be the person he wanted me to be. I got so good at it that I forgot who I actually was, what I actually wanted, and then I met you. And suddenly I was feeling things I'd never felt before, wanting things I didn't know I could want." "What kind of things?" Emily's voice was soft. I took a shaky breath. "I want to know what your hair feels like. I want to wake up in your bed and make you coffee and watch you work in your garden. I want to paint you, really paint you, not just your hands. I want to kiss you until we're both breathless, and then do it again." Emily's intake of breath was sharp in the quiet room. "But more than that," I continued. "I want to know your stories. I want to know what makes you laugh and what makes you cry, and what you dream about when you're alone. I want to be the person you tell things to. I want to matter to you the way you've started to matter to me. Rachel, I know I've been confusing, hot and cold, interested and then distant. I know I hurt you when I pulled away, and I'm sorry. I was scared of how much I wanted this, wanted you, when I didn't even understand what this was." Emily set down her tea and turned to face me fully. "And now? Do you understand now?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Sitting in the golden firelight with her hair loose around her shoulders and her eyes full of hope and caution, and something that might have been love. "I understand that I'm falling for you," I said. "I understand that when I thought you might be hurt tonight, nothing else mattered except getting to you. I understand that I've been more myself in the past few weeks with you than I was in 5 years of marriage." "And that scares you?" "Terrifies me," I admitted. "But not as much as the thought of losing you, because I was too afraid to be honest." Emily was quiet for a long moment, studying my face in the flickering light. "Can I tell you something?" she said finally. I nodded. "I've been attracted to women before. I've even dated a few. But I've never felt anything like what I feel for you." She paused. "You make me want to be braver, kinder, more myself. When you pulled away, I thought maybe I'd misread everything. Maybe I'd pushed too hard, moved too fast. You didn't. I was just processing." "And what did you conclude from all that processing?" I set down my tea and moved closer to her on the couch, close enough to see the gold flecks in her eyes, close enough to smell her shampoo. "I concluded that I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions for me. I'm tired of missing out on beautiful things because they don't fit into the neat little box I thought my life was supposed to be. And what do you want instead? I want to see where this goes. I want to be brave enough to find out what happens when two people care about each other and aren't afraid to show it." Emily reached out and touched my face, the same gentle touch that had started everything between us. "Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, I don't think there's any going back, at least not for me." "I'm sure," I whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything." And then, finally, Emily leaned forward and kissed me. It was soft at first, tentative, like she was still giving me a chance to change my mind. But when I kissed her back, when I reached up to tangle my fingers in her hair, she deepened the kiss with a hunger that matched my own. She tasted like tea and rain and possibility. Her lips were soft, her hands gentle but sure as they framed my face. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against mine. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," she whispered. "So have I. I just didn't know it yet." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside Emily's living room, wrapped in firelight and each other's arms, I felt safer than I had in years. "Stay," Emily said. "Tonight, I mean. The tree's blocking your way home anyway, and the power's out." "Are you sure?" I'm sure. We don't have to. We can just sleep. But I don't want you to go. I don't want to go either. So I stayed. We talked until late into the night, sharing stories and fears and dreams, kissing occasionally when words weren't enough. When we finally went to bed, Emily's bed, in Emily's room that smelled like lavender and rain, we held each other close and listened to the storm finally pass. For the first time in months, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, safe in the arms of someone who saw me exactly as I was and wanted me anyway. 6 months later, I woke up in Emily's bed to the sound of rain on the roof and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. Through the window, I could see the garden in its autumn glory, the last tomatoes hanging heavy on the vine, the herbs still green and fragrant despite the cooling weather, the sunflowers tall and proud with their faces full of seeds. I'd been waking up in this bed 3 or 4 nights a week for the past few months, ever since we'd stopped pretending that what was happening between us was casual or temporary. My lease was up next, por favor, continuo llorando a sua resposta. Agent Logo Novo Prompt Historia month, and we'd been talking about me moving in officially. The idea still made my heart race, but with excitement now instead of fear. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Emily called from downstairs. "Coffee's ready when you are." I pulled on one of her oversized sweaters and padded downstairs to find her at the kitchen table, surrounded by seed catalogs and garden planning notebooks. She was already dressed for the day in jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair braided back, looking like she'd been up for hours. "Planning next year's garden already?" I asked, kissing the top of her head before pouring myself coffee. "Always. This is the best time to think about what worked and what didn't, what I want to try differently." She looked up at me with that smile that still made my knees weak. "Plus, I have a new gardening partner to consider now." We'd started working in the garden together almost immediately after that storm night. At first, I'd been hopeless, killing seedlings, overwatering everything, unable to tell weeds from vegetables. But Emily had been patient, teaching me the way her grandmother had taught her, with gentle hands and endless encouragement. Now I had my own small section of raised beds, where I grew herbs for cooking and flowers for painting. It wasn't much compared to Emily's elaborate setup, but it was mine. And watching things grow under my care had been almost as transformative as falling in love. "What are you thinking for next year?" I asked, settling beside her with my coffee. "More cutting flowers, definitely. Your paintings have been selling so well, and you're always running out of subjects." She flipped through a catalog page of zinnias and cosmos, maybe a dedicated artist's garden section. My paintings. That was still hard to believe. What had started as a way to process my feelings had turned into something more. I'd been showing my work at the local coffee shop, then at a gallery in the next town over. Last month, I'd sold enough pieces to cover my rent and groceries with some left over. "I love that idea," I said. "Though I have to admit, my favorite subject is still the gardener herself." Emily blushed, as she always did when I mentioned the portrait series I'd been working on. Paintings of her hands in soil, her profile in morning light, her laugh caught in watercolor and joy. "Speaking of which," I continued, "I have something to show you." I retrieved the canvas I'd been hiding in the closet for the past week. It was my largest painting yet. Emily in her garden at sunset, surrounded by the abundance she'd created, her face turned toward the light with an expression of pure contentment. "Rachel." Emily breathed, her hands flying to her mouth. I can't." "You made me look beautiful. I painted what I see," I said simply. "You are beautiful. You've always been beautiful." She stood up and wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight against her chest. I could feel her heart beating, steady and strong. "I love you," she whispered into my hair. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." Good scared or bad scared? Good scared. The kind that means it matters. We'd said "I love you" for the first time 2 months ago, on a quiet evening much like this one. It had felt as natural as breathing, as inevitable as sunrise. Not the desperate, clinging love I'd thought I'd had with David, but something deeper, steadier, more real. "I have something for you too," Emily said, pulling back to look at me. "Well, not for you exactly. More like, with you." She led me to the kitchen window and pointed toward the back corner of the garden, where I could see fresh lumber and what looked like the beginning of a small structure. Is that a studio for you? I mean, if you want it. I know you've been working at the kitchen table, and that's fine, but I thought maybe you'd like a space that's just yours, with good light and room for all your supplies, and I silenced her with a kiss, pouring all my gratitude and love and amazement into the contact. When we broke apart, she was smiling. I take it you like the idea? I love the idea. I love you. I love this life we're building together. Even though it's not what you planned? I thought about that. A year ago, I'd been married to a man, living in a city, convinced I knew exactly what my life was supposed to look like. Now I was in love with a woman, living in a small town, making art and growing vegetables, and discovering parts of myself I'd never known existed. Especially because it's not what I planned, I said. The best things never are. Emily smiled and pulled me closer. So you'll move in officially? Make this our home instead of just mine? Are you sure you want me here full time? I'm still learning how to garden. I leave paintbrushes in the sink. I talk to myself when I'm working, I'm sure. I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to plan gardens together and fight about whether to plant more tomatoes or more flowers. I want to watch you discover new things about yourself and the world. I want to grow old with you, Rachel. The words hit me like a physical force. Grow old together, the future stretching out before us, full of seasons and gardens and paintings and love. Yes, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Yes to all of it. We spent the morning planning, not just the garden, but our life together. Where to put my easel in the new studio, how to combine our furniture, whether to get a cat. Emily was lobbying hard for an orange tabby she'd seen at the shelter. Around noon, we took a break to walk through the garden, checking on the late-season vegetables and planning the winter cleanup. The air was crisp with the promise of frost, but the sun was warm on our faces. You know what I realized? I said as we picked the last of the cherry tomatoes. What's that? I spent so many years trying to be the right person for someone else that I forgot there might be someone out there who was right for me exactly as I am. Emily stopped walking and turned to face me, a handful of tomatoes cradled in her palm. And now? Now I know that love isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more yourself. You make me more myself, Emily. Braver, more creative, more alive. You do the same for me, she said softly. Before you, I was happy with my garden and my quiet life, but I was also lonely, I think. I didn't realize how much I wanted someone to share it all with until you showed up. We stood there in the garden we'd tended together, surrounded by the fruits of our labor and our love, and I felt a deep sense of rightness settle into my bones. This was what happiness looked like. Not the frantic, desperate kind I'd chased with David, but something quieter, more sustainable, like a perennial plant that comes back stronger every year. I have one more surprise, Emily said, reaching into her pocket. I was going to wait until tonight, but she pulled out a small velvet box, and my heart stopped. Emily, it's not what you think, she said quickly, laughing at my expression. I mean, it is, but not. We don't have to call it that if you're not ready. It's just. I saw this and thought of you, and I wanted you to have something that shows how I feel. She opened the box to reveal a simple silver ring, set with a small, perfect stone, the color of spring leaves. It's a peridot, she explained, the stone of new beginnings. I thought, after everything you've been through, everything we've been through together. I held out my hand, trembling slightly, and let her slide the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, catching the afternoon light like a promise. I love it, I whispered. I love you. So we're doing this? Really doing this? I looked around at the garden, at the house that would soon be our house, at Emily with her dirt-stained hands and hopeful eyes, at the life we'd grown together from nothing but possibility and care. We're doing this, I confirmed. Whatever this becomes, we're doing it together. Emily kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise, while the autumn sun shone down on our garden and our future stretched out before us like an endless growing season. That evening, As we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, I started a new painting. Not of the garden this time, but of Emily's hands holding a seedling. Something small and green and full of potential, ready to grow into something beautiful given the right care and attention. Just like us. 6 months ago, I'd been a woman running from a broken marriage, convinced I knew who I was and what I wanted. Now, I was someone entirely different. An artist, a gardener, a woman in love with another woman, someone brave enough to let herself bloom in unexpected soil. The best things I'd learned really never are what you plan. They're what you discover when you're brave enough to let yourself grow. And as Emily reached over to take my hand, her thumb tracing over the new ring on my finger, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. 2 women, 2 hearts, 1 garden full of endless possibilities. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me. For waiting while I figured myself out. For showing me that love can be gentle and strong at the same time. Thank you for being brave enough to stay. For letting yourself be seen, for choosing this, choosing us." We sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, our hands intertwined, our future as bright and full of promise as the garden that had brought us together. Sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the most unexpected places. Sometimes you have to lose yourself completely to find out who you really are. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who loves you not despite your growth, but because of it. I'd found my someone. I'd found my home. I'd found myself. And it had all started with a simple invitation. "Come by later. I'll show you my garden." The best decisions, I realized, often begin with saying yes to something that scares you. I was so glad I'd said yes. Before we head inside for the night, I want to thank you for joining Rachel and Emily on their journey of love and self-discovery. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and let me know in the comments what unexpected places love has bloomed in your own life. Sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow where we least expect them.